Everyone thinks Texas is flat, hot, sprawling, endless plains where the only thing rising above the horizon is a water tower or maybe an oil derrick. And yeah, most of Texas is exactly that, but here's what the real estate market doesn't want you to know. Tucked into the far western edge of the state and buried deep in the hill country are actual mountain towns. Not hills pretending to be mountains, real elevation, 4,000, 5,000 feet above sea level, towns surrounded by volcanic peaks, limestone canyons, and high desert valleys that look like they were airlifted out of New Mexico or Colorado. And the kicker? You can buy into these places for a fraction of what you'd pay anywhere else in the country. We're talking median home prices in the $150,000 range. Towns where property taxes are frozen once you hit 65. Places where the pandemic real estate frenzy just collapsed. Here are 12 cheapest Texas mountain towns you've probably never heard of. Fort Davis. Fort Davis sits at nearly 5,000 feet above sea level. That makes it the highest town in Texas. The town is surrounded by the Davis Mountains, which create what geologists call a sky island ecosystem. The desert floor around Fort Davis is thousands of feet lower, so the town itself feels perched on top of the world. The median home price here is $198,450. And yes, that number is up 21% from the year before. But here's the thing nobody mentions. It's down 69% from the pandemic peak. That means Fort Davis had a speculative bubble. It popped, and now the market is sitting in this weird reset phase where early buyers are either underwater or desperate to exit. Fort Davis has less than 1,000 people. The local economy revolves around the McDonald Observatory, which is one of the premier astronomical research facilities in the country. That observatory is also why Fort Davis has some of the strictest dark sky ordinances in Texas. At night, you can see the Milky Way with your naked eye. The trade-off is healthcare. Fort Davis doesn't have a hospital. The nearest comprehensive facility is Culberson Hospital in Van Horn, which is 121 miles away. Alpine. Alpine is the cultural and economic center of the Big Bend region. It sits at 4,462 feet, surrounded by the Davis and Glass Mountains. The town has about 6,000 people, which makes it feel like a legitimate small city. Alpine is home to Sul Ross State University, which stabilizes the local economy and provides a layer of culture you don't usually get in high desert towns. The median home price in Alpine is $224,000. That's 26% higher than last year, but it's still well below the Texas state average of $296,000. The market here is described as cool with light activity, which is real estate code for no bidding wars, no pressure, you can take your time. Alpine has something most of these towns don't, a real hospital. The Big Bend Regional Medical Center provides emergency care, lab work, imaging, and surgical services. For routine medical needs and most emergencies, you're covered locally. That's a huge advantage if you're in your 60s or 70s and starting to think about what happens when health issues become more frequent. Sanderson. Sanderson calls itself the cactus capital of Texas, which should tell you everything you need to know about the landscape. It's located in Terrell County, right on the edge where the Trans-Pecos High Desert meets the deep limestone canyons of the Pecos River. The terrain here is vertical, rugged mesas, deep draws, and a skyline that feels more like southern Utah than central Texas. The average home price in Sanderson is $153,983. That's the lowest entry point on this entire list. And it gets better. The price per square foot is $107. For context, the national average is over $200. So you're getting nearly double the space for your money compared to most of the country. But here's where Sanderson really separates itself. Terrell County has the lowest median property tax in Texas. The average homeowner here pays $285 per year in property taxes. $285. That's not a monthly payment, that's annual. For retirees on a fixed income, that number is almost incomprehensible. You could own your home outright and pay less in property taxes than most people pay for a single utility bill. The economy in Sanderson is driven by ranching and slow tourism. People pass through on their way to Big Bend or driving historic Highway 90. The town itself has about 400 people, maybe fewer, depending on who you ask. There's a strong community spirit here, partly because everyone knows everyone, and partly because isolation forces interdependence. Crime is virtually non-existent. The biggest risk in Sanderson is boredom, healthcare is the obvious concern. The nearest comprehensive medical facilities are in Fort Stockton or Alpine, both of which are 60 to 90 miles away. If you have a medical emergency, you're looking at a long drive or a helicopter airlift. That's the trade. You get rock bottom affordability and near total solitude, but you're self-reliant in a way that most modern Americans aren't used to. Sanderson is for retirees who are okay with frontier living. People who spent their working years in cities and now want the exact opposite. If that's you, this town will feel like freedom. If it's not, it'll feel like exile. The surrounding landscape is stark and beautiful in a way that takes time to appreciate. Mesas that glow orange at sunset, canyons that cut hundreds of feet into the earth, night skies so dark that meteor showers feel like they're happening directly overhead. Canyon sits just south of Amarillo, which immediately disqualifies it in most people's minds because they assume the Panhandle is flat and boring. And yeah, most of it is. But Canyon is different. The town is built at the edge of Palo Duro Canyon, which is the second largest canyon system in the United States. The canyon is over 120 miles long and up to 20 miles wide in some places, with sheer red rock walls dropping 600 feet to the canyon floor. It's not the Grand Canyon, but it's close enough that comparisons are legitimate. The median home price in Canyon is $275,000. That's higher than the Pecos towns, but it comes with a trade: stability. Canyon's real estate market has appreciated at a steady 5.5% per year for the last decade. No wild swings, no speculative bubbles. For retirees who are risk averse and want predictable property values, that's worth paying a premium. Canyon is also home to West Texas A&M University, which means the town has infrastructure that most rural areas don't. High-speed internet, a functioning downtown with restaurants and coffee shops, cultural events tied to the university, and most importantly, proximity to Amarillo's healthcare system. Amarillo has level 1 and level 2 trauma centers, which are only 20 miles away. That's better medical access than most mountain towns in Colorado or North Carolina. Palo Duro Canyon State Park is the main attraction. Hundreds of miles of hiking and biking trails, rock climbing, photography. The park hosts an outdoor musical every summer that draws tourists from all over the state. For retirees, the park offers the same kind of nature-centric lifestyle you'd get in Moab or Sedona, but without the crowds or the price tag. The town also has the Panhandle Plains Historical Museum, which is the largest history museum in Texas. For retirees who want intellectual stimulation alongside outdoor recreation, Canyon provides both. You can spend your morning hiking the canyon rim and your afternoon learning about the Comanche presence in the region or the cattle drives that shape the Panhandle economy. Canyon is the safe bet. It's not the cheapest town on this list, and it's not the most dramatic, but it's the one where you're least likely to regret your decision 5 years later. You get the mountain town aesthetic, the outdoor recreation, and the infrastructure to support a comfortable retirement. For a lot of people, that balance is exactly what they're looking for. The winters here are cold, which is something to consider if you're coming from a warm climate, but the summers are mild compared to the brutal heat of Central or South Texas. Leakey. Leakey is the seat of Real County, which has a population of about 3,000 people spread across 700 square miles. The town itself sits deep in the Frio River Canyon, surrounded by steep limestone ridges that rise 500 feet or more above the valley floor. The Frio River is spring-fed, so it runs clear and cold even in the middle of summer, and the canyon walls create a microclimate that's noticeably cooler than the surrounding hill country. The average home value in Leakey is $304,051. That's higher than most of the towns on this list, but it's down 5% from last year, which signals that the market is softening. Active listings are up 12%, and homes are sitting on the market for 149 days on average, which is nearly 50% longer than 2 years ago. Translation: sellers are motivated, and buyers have leverage. Leakey's economy is seasonal. Summer brings tourists who want to float the Frio River or camp in the canyon. Winter is quiet. The town has a few local restaurants and a grocery store, but most services require a drive to Uvalde or Kerrville. Healthcare is handled by the Rock Springs Medical Clinic, which is about 30 miles away and provides primary care and management of chronic conditions like diabetes or hypertension. For anything more serious, you're looking at a 95-mile drive to Frio Regional Hospital in Pearsall. The appeal of Leakey is the verticality. The hill country is known for rolling hills, but Leakey has actual ridges and cliffs. It's the kind of place where you can stand on your back deck and look down into a canyon. For retirees who want the hill country aesthetic but crave something more dramatic, Leakey delivers. The downside is the isolation. The town has fewer than 500 year-round residents. In winter, it can feel abandoned. If you need social interaction or regular access to amenities, Leakey will wear on you. But if you spent your career surrounded by people and now you want space, this is one of the few places in Texas where you can actually get it. The sound of the river is constant. At night, you can hear owls and coyotes. In spring, the bluebonnets and Indian paintbrush cover the hillsides in waves of color. It's the kind of place that forces you to slow down. And for retirees who are ready for that shift, Leakey is transformative. Utopia. Utopia is an unincorporated community in Uvalde County with a population under 300. The town sits in the Sabanal Canyon, surrounded by bald cypress trees and limestone peaks that rise hundreds of feet above the canyon floor. Locals call it the Swiss Alps of Texas, which is hyperbolic but not entirely inaccurate. The canyon walls create a sense of enclosure that's rare in Texas, and the dense vegetation makes it feel almost subtropical despite being in the middle of the desert. The average home price in Utopia is $641,390. That's the highest on this list, and it's a significant jump from the Pecos towns. But here's the context. The median sale price has dropped 7.55% over the last year, and it's down nearly 40% from the pandemic peak. Active listings are up 64%, which means the market is flooded with inventory that's been sitting unsold. For buyers, that's an opportunity to negotiate. Utopia is for people who want luxury in isolation. The town has a handful of high-end vacation rentals and a gourmet restaurant called Mac and Ernie's that's been written up in national food magazines. The Sabanal River runs through the center of town, and there are private swimming holes and hiking trails that aren't accessible to the general public. It's the kind of place where you can have a mountain retreat that feels exclusive without actually being gated or corporate. The trade-off is the same as Leakey: extreme seclusion. The nearest hospital is in Uvalde, which is about 50 miles away. There's no grocery store in Utopia itself, no gas station. If you run out of milk or need to fill up your tank, you're driving. For retirees who are used to suburban convenience, that adjustment can be harder than expected. Utopia is aspirational. It's the town you buy into if you've already done the rough and tumble rural retirement thing and now you want something that feels a little more refined. You're still in the middle of nowhere, but you're in the middle of nowhere with good wine and a view. The cypress trees along the river create a canopy that stays green year-round, which is unusual for Texas. In summer, the shade keeps temperatures bearable. In winter, the limestone cliffs trap sunlight and create pockets of warmth. The town has a rhythm that's dictated by nature rather than commerce. And for retirees who are ready to disconnect, that rhythm is exactly what they're looking for. Presidio. Presidio sits at the confluence of the Rio Grande and the Rio Conchos, surrounded by the Chinati Mountains. The name is Spanish for fortress, and the terrain backs that up. The mountains here are jagged and volcanic, with peaks that rise abruptly from the desert floor. Presidio is the gateway to Big Bend Ranch State Park, which is often described as the more rugged, less touristy sibling of Big Bend National Park. The average home value in Presidio is $154,720. That's nearly identical to Sanderson, which makes Presidio one of the cheapest mountain towns in the state. The population is about 4,000, which is large enough to have basic services, but small enough to maintain a frontier vibe. Presidio has a unique binational culture because it's directly across the river from Ojinaga, Mexico. The two towns have a long history of trade and cross-border family ties, and you'll hear as much Spanish as English on the streets. For retirees who spent time in the Southwest or who have an interest in border culture, Presidio offers a level of authenticity that's hard to find in more polished destinations. The landscape is the main draw. Big Bend Ranch State Park has over 300,000 acres of high desert wilderness. There are hiking trails, river access for rafting and kayaking, and some of the best stargazing in the country. The park is less developed than Big Bend National Park, which means fewer crowds and a more solitary experience. Healthcare in Presidio is limited. There's a small clinic for primary care, but serious medical issues require a trip to Alpine or even El Paso, which is about 250 miles away. That's a significant barrier for retirees with chronic health conditions or mobility issues. Presidio is for adventurers, people who want to spend their retirement hiking, exploring, and engaging with a landscape that feels untamed. If you're looking for golf courses or planned communities, this isn't your town, but if you want to wake up to mountain views and spend your days in the backcountry, Presidio is one of the best deals in Texas. The summers here are brutal, with temperatures regularly exceeding 100 degrees, but the winters are mild and perfect for outdoor activities. The Chinati Mountains provide endless exploration opportunities, with trails that lead to abandoned mines and overlooks where you can see into Mexico for miles. Camp Wood. Camp Wood is located at the base of the Balcones Escarpment, where the Nueces River has carved deep canyons through the limestone. The town sits at the western edge of the hill country, and the terrain here is noticeably more rugged than the rolling hills you see closer to Austin or San Antonio. The escarpment creates dramatic elevation changes with ridges that offer panoramic views of the surrounding valleys. The median listing price for standard residential homes in Camp Wood is $225,000. That's a significant discount compared to the Eastern Hill Country, where similar properties can easily run $500,000 or more. The town also has a range of inventory, from small lot homes to high acreage ranch properties that exceed $1 million. For retirees who want flexibility, Camp Wood offers options. The cost of living in Camp Wood is 9% lower than the national average, and housing costs are 18% lower. That's a meaningful difference for people on fixed incomes. A social security check that would barely cover rent in a city goes much further here, and the quality of life is arguably higher because you're not spending your days in traffic or surrounded by strip malls. Camp Wood has basic services, a grocery store, a post office, a few local restaurants. For medical care, there's a small clinic that handles routine visits and prescriptions. Anything more serious requires a drive to Uvalde or Kerrville, both of which are about an hour away. That's manageable for most retirees, but it does require planning. The town is quiet, the economy is based on ranching, and a small amount of tourism tied to the Nueces River. In summer, you'll see people kayaking or fishing, but it's nothing like the crowds you'd find on the Guadalupe or the Comal. For retirees who want access to water without the noise, Camp Wood is ideal. The Nueces River here is slower and deeper than the rivers farther east, which makes it better for fishing than tubing. Bass, catfish, and perch are common, and there are stretches of the river where you can fish all day without seeing another person. The surrounding ranch land is dotted with live oaks and mesquite, and in spring the wildflowers create a carpet of color that stretches to the horizon. Camp Wood doesn't have the dramatic canyon walls of Leakey or Utopia, but it has a rugged beauty that grows on you over time. Vanderpool. Vanderpool is barely a town. The population has been counted at anywhere from 22 to 100 people, depending on how you define residency. It's an unincorporated community in Bandera County, located along the Sabinal River in the Sabinal Canyon. The main attraction here is the Lost Maples State Natural Area, which is named for the big-tooth maple trees that grow in the high ridges and valleys. These maples are rare in Texas, and in the fall, they turn vibrant shades of red and gold, creating a foliage experience that's more commonly associated with New England or the Appalachians. The elevation in Vanderpool ranges from about 1,551 feet at the valley floor to over 2,100 feet on the ridges. That's lower than the Pecos towns, but the prominence of the hills relative to the valley creates a vertical landscape that feels like a mountain environment. The canyon walls are steep and the vegetation is dense, which adds to the sense of enclosure and seclusion. Vanderpool's economy is driven by small-scale ranching and tourism tied to Lost Maples. There's a single restaurant, a small general store, and not much else. The area is popular with motorcyclists because the roads through the canyon are winding and scenic, and on weekends you'll see groups of riders passing through, but most of the time, Vanderpool is empty. For retirees, Vanderpool is the ultimate escape. You're not just leaving the city, you're leaving the concept of urban life entirely. There's no hospital, no urgent care, no pharmacy. The nearest comprehensive services are in Uvalde, which is about 40 miles away. If you have a medical emergency, you're relying on a volunteer fire department and an ambulance that has to drive through narrow canyon roads to reach you. But if you can accept that level of risk, Vanderpool offers something almost no other place in Texas can: total solitude and a landscape that changes with the seasons. The fall, colors, the spring wildflowers, the sound of the river. For people who spent their working years in crowded offices and suburban cul-de-sacs, Vanderpool is the antidote. The Lost Maples area is also home to rare bird species, including the green kingfisher, which birdwatchers travel from across the country to see. The hiking trails in the state natural area range from easy riverside walks to steep climbs that take you to the top of the ridges. From the high points, you can see for miles across the hill country, and in fall, the view is dominated by the fiery colors of the maples. Vanderpool is for retirees who are willing to trade convenience for beauty and who understand that isolation can be a gift rather than a burden. Harper. Harper is located on a high plateau in Gillespie County at an elevation exceeding 2,000 feet. The town sits at the intersection of the hill country and the Great Plains, which gives it a unique landscape that doesn't quite fit either category. The terrain is open and rolling, with wide vistas that stretch for miles. At night, the sky is enormous, and the Milky Way is visible without any light pollution. The average home value in Harper is $413,053. That's the second highest on this list after Utopia, but it comes with a level of stability that justifies the price. The market here has only dropped 1.7% over the last year, which is mild compared to the 30 to 70% drops you see in other towns. For retirees who prioritize financial security, Harper is a low-risk investment. Harper has a population of about 1,200 people. The economy is based on ranching and agriculture, with some tourism tied to the nearby state parks and the Hill Country Wine Trail. The town itself has a small downtown area with a few local businesses, but most residents drive to Fredericksburg or Kerrville for shopping and services. Healthcare in Harper is limited to a small clinic. For anything more serious, you're driving to Fredericksburg or Kerrville, both of which are about 30 to 40 miles away. That's not ideal, but it's manageable for most retirees who are in reasonably good health. The main draw of Harper is the atmosphere. It's quiet, peaceful, the kind of place where you can sit on your porch and watch the sunset without hearing a single car pass by. The wildfire risk is classified as major, which is something to consider if you're buying property with a lot of acreage. But for retirees who want a low-key, nature-focused lifestyle, Harper delivers. The town has an authentic rural Texas feel that's becoming harder to find as the hill country continues to develop. There are no chain restaurants, no big box stores, just a post office, a general store, and a handful of local businesses that have been run by the same families for generations. For retirees who value authenticity over convenience, Harper is one of the last places in the hill country where you can still experience that kind of community. The nights here are exceptionally dark, which makes stargazing a primary activity. The plateau elevation keeps temperatures slightly cooler than the valleys, and the constant breeze makes even summer evenings tolerable. Pecos. Pecos is located in the heart of the Trans-Pecos region, surrounded by high desert plains and distant mountain ranges. The town has about 9,000 people, which makes it one of the larger communities on this list. The economy is tied to the oil and gas industry, which means Pecos goes through boom and bust cycles depending on energy prices. But for retirees who are buying property and not looking for work, that volatility is less of a concern. The average home value in Pecos is $167,008. That's already low, but here's the kicker. Zillow forecasts an additional 11.8% decline over the next year, which would bring the median value down to the mid $140,000 range. That's a significant drop, and it makes Pecos one of the best timing plays on this list. If you're willing to wait a few months and watch the market, you could walk into a deal that didn't exist even 6 months ago. Pecos has the infrastructure you'd expect from a town its size. Grocery stores, gas stations, a hospital. The town also serves as a gateway to Guadalupe Mountains National Park, which is about an hour-and-a-half drive to the north. The park has some of the best hiking in Texas, with trails that climb to over 8,000 feet and offer views across the Chihuahuan Desert. The downside of Pecos is the boom and bust mentality. When oil prices are high, the town feels prosperous. When they're low, it feels abandoned. For retirees, that can be jarring. You're not insulated from the economic cycles the way you would be in a more diversified economy. But if you can handle the ups and downs, Pecos offers a combination of affordability, infrastructure, and access to high mountain wilderness wilderness that's hard to beat. You're getting a real town with real services, but you're only a short drive from landscapes that feel like the middle of nowhere. The Pecos River runs through the town, and while it's not as scenic as the spring-fed rivers of the hill country, it provides a green corridor through an otherwise arid landscape. The town has a few local parks and a municipal golf course, which is more than most isolated desert towns can offer. For retirees who want the affordability of frontier living but need some basic amenities, Pecos strikes a balance. The summers here are hot, but the low humidity makes it more bearable than the Gulf Coast, and the winters are mild enough that you can spend most days outdoors. Medina. Medina is located along the Medina River, nestled against the high limestone ridges of the Balcones Escarpment. The town is known as the apple capital of Texas because the microclimate here supports apple orchards, which is unusual this far south. The elevation and the river create cooler temperatures than the surrounding plains, and the orchards give the town a pastoral feel that's more reminiscent of the Appalachians than the hill country. The average home value in Medina is $368,802. That's down 6.5% from last year, which aligns with the broader trend of market softening across the hill country. The town has a population of about 500, which makes it small enough to feel secluded, but large enough to have a sense of community. Medina hosts an annual apple festival that draws visitors from across the state. The downtown area has a few local shops and restaurants, and the river provides opportunities for kayaking and fishing. For retirees, the town offers a balance between nature and accessibility. You're close enough to San Antonio or Kerrville that you can make a day trip for services, but you're far enough out that you're not dealing with suburban sprawl or traffic. Healthcare in Medina is limited to a small clinic. For comprehensive care, you're driving to Kerrville or Bandera, both of which are about 30 to 40 miles away. That's the trade you make for living in a small hill country town, and for most retirees, it's acceptable as long as they're proactive about managing their health. Medina is for people who want the hill country aesthetic without the commercialization. It's quieter than Fredericksburg or Bourne, less crowded than Wimberley, and more affordable than most of the towns along the Interstate 35 corridor. You get riverside serenity, rugged ridge views, and a community that still feels authentic. The apple orchards here bloom in spring, covering the hillsides in white and pink flowers. In fall, the harvest brings families to the local orchards to pick their own apples and buy fresh cider. The Medina River is clear and cold, fed by springs upstream, and it's popular with kayakers who want a peaceful float without the party atmosphere of the Guadalupe. The limestone ridges provide hiking opportunities, and from the high points, you can see across the valley to the hills beyond. Medina doesn't have the dramatic elevation of Fort Davis or the deep canyons of Leakey, but it has a gentleness that appeals to retirees who want beauty without extremes. These 12 towns represent a specific kind of retirement strategy. You're not buying into a planned community with a golf course and a homeowners association. You're buying elevation, solitude, and a landscape that most people don't know exists in Texas. The trade-offs are real. Healthcare is limited, services are sparse. In some of these towns, you're an hour or more from a grocery store, but the affordability is undeniable. Fort Davis, Sanderson, Presidio, and Pecos are all under $200,000 for a median home. The Texas Senior Homestead Exemption freezes your school property taxes once you hit 65, which means your housing costs stay flat even if property values rise. And if the proposed Operation Double Nickel legislation passes, that freeze would kick in at 55, which would open up these towns to an entirely new wave of early retirees. The 2026 market is offering something that hasn't existed since before the pandemic: inventory, leverage, and prices that reflect actual local demand instead of speculative overreach. If you've been priced out of the Rockies or the Appalachians or anywhere else that calls itself a mountain town, these 12 places in Texas are worth a serious look. You're getting the elevation, the scenery, and the lifestyle. You're just getting it at a price that actually makes sense.